line with us today, we have Dr. Nozipho N Nxumalo. And we're going to be discussing her wonderful book, Pillars of Joy in Marriage, Looking at Marriage in Heaven's Eyes. Available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. But guys, listen, if you want to gather everything that Dr. Nxumalo has to offer, now you can't purchase the book through the website, but you're definitely going to want to head to her personal site to gather more information about her and more information about this wonderful book that she's established. And that's infinitypinnacle.com. So one more time, that's infinitypinnacle.com for more information about Dr. Nxumalo. And I will say that she was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business. Stellar Literary, Press, and Media Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, well, give yourself the best gift you can probably give and contact Stellar Literary. And you can find out more information on them at stellarliterary.com. And guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure and such an honor to have Dr. Nxumalo here on the line. Now, the moment you go to her Amazon page, her Barnes & Noble page, infinitypinnacle.com, and you start to do any research on the book, you instantly understand what we're going to be discussing today. Now, I'm really looking forward to this because, listen, in the generation that I was brought up in, we're surrounded by, these fairy tale marriages. We're surrounded by these Disney movies. And a lot of times we kind of can fool ourselves to thinking that when we fall in love, when we get married, it's going to play out like a Disney movie. It's going to play out like a romantic comedy. And guys, that could not be further from the truth, okay? It takes work, it takes commitment, and I'm so glad that we have Dr. Nxumalo here on the line because this is really where her book originated. Through her own experience, through her wonderful marriage that she established, she comprised this book to really put out for her listening audience to make sure that they were very well aware of the commitment and the work that needed to be dedicated in order to lead a successful marriage. And not only that, but you also have to infuse God and religion into the equation as well to really take full advantage of everything that can come. And listen, Dr. Nxumalo is the expert, okay? She's written the book, she's pulling from her experience, and she's done the research. So she's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Dr. Nxumalo, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Perfect.
Under the circumstances of COVID.
Absolutely. Well, listen, the past 2 years, going on what seems like 30 years, has been quite the marathon for everybody involved, right? And the extent and the variations of lockdown that we've all experienced. So I truly understand and can resonate with what you're saying. But it sounds great that you are doing well, you have your health, and we are very excited to pick up all the words of wisdom that you're going to be able to articulate to our audience today. Now, Dr. Nxumalo, I know we have so much information to cover, but before we go into the book, let's hold off slightly. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Yes, my name is Nozipho Nxumalo. Nozipho in my African language means gift, the gift of God. Yes, I'm a retired employee of the Ohio Department of Education. I hold a PhD in education with concentration in higher education and a coordinate area in research, quantitative research methodology. My BS was in psychology, double major social work, and my master in counseling psychology. And after that, I did a graduate certificate in family life with Andrews University Theological Seminary. I'm married. I've been in this marriage journey for 52 years with my husband, who just passed away, COVID complications last year. But I am doing well.
You know, Dr. Nxumalo, thank you very much for articulating all of that. And let me just tell you, first and foremost, before we even move any further, my sincerest condolences to the passing of your husband, especially given the fact that it was COVID related. And again, as we stated already, these past 2 years have offered a lot of adversity to so many people. And of course, it clearly has touched your family and your lives. So my sincerest apologies given all of that. But it sounds like the marriage that you had established with your husband was an absolutely beautiful thing, and it led to this wonderful book. So without further ado, Dr. Nxumalo, let's jump right in, okay? Pillars of Joy in Marriage. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Pillars of Joy in Marriage is based on the premise that marriage does not make you happy, but it develops your character. And I liken marriage to a rose bush, which is beautiful, a nice aroma of flowers, but it has thorns at the same time to deal with, to contend with. So marriage is just like that, sweet, absolutely, but it is difficult journey to negotiate. And because of that, Pillars of Joy is looking at understanding that marriage itself is an institution that was developed by God himself. Mm-hmm. And he has an idea how he wanted the marriage to go. But people at the same time, that's the battle of the mind, they have their own idea of how they want the marriage to go. And sometimes, if not all the time, those do not reconcile. We know from Adam and Eve what happened to them in the Garden of Eden when they decided to disobey what God had said. He said they should not go around the garden by themselves. They should be together. But that was not important to them. And Eve was a target of the devil, which even today the devil is targeting us by trying to control our minds to say, hey, you can do this by yourself. You don't need God. Absolutely. So that's why my book has these 22 pillars of joy to try and sway people back to what God intended for this covenant. If we remember, God did not seal the covenant, the marriage, with a kiss, which we do now. He seals it with a covenant of permanency until death do us part, not until shortcomings of silliness or whatever do us apart. So the book is concentrating on bringing us back to understanding what God intended us to do within the marriage institution. One of those I postulate in my book, the concept that God is our Father, both your husband and your wife, both of you are God's children. And then in that means in the context of marriage, he becomes your father-in-law. And if we would understand and embrace that God is our Father, that duality of fathership, he's our Father and also our father-in-law, we would think a lot before we treat God's child.
Yeah, of course. You know, Dr. Nxumalo, great points that you brought up. And thank you, because you actually answered another question that I was going to go into. So you're so brilliant. You already went there. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. Next concept that I want to go into in doing research on your book. I know that it's brought up and it's talked about a lot, your particular approach to marital success. Now, you've already talked about there's 22 pillars that you've established in your book. Now, we don't want to get into all of them. Guys, you know what you have to do. Okay, if you want to get all 22 pillars, there's no getting around it. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, infinitypinnacle.com is where you have to go, right? But since we have you here on the line, Dr. Nxumalo, talk to us about that approach to marital success.
To me, I saw marriage, when I was doing my research, I did not concentrate only on the topics that were, on the research that was related to marriage per se. I made sure that I read widely, even books that were not referencing marriage, but they talked about partnership, they talked about investment. And that's why I say in chapter 13, marriage is like an investment. You deposit, massive deposits.
Absolutely.
Looking forward that later you begin to catch in. Some people do a lot of withdrawals. They withdraw instead of depositing, and that becomes a disaster. And also I looked at marriage as a ministry, looking at the love affair between Christ and his bride, the church. So that is not an easy undertaking to look at marriage as ministry, because you have to think about unconditional love. Sometimes your spouse is not lovable at all. You know, he has done something to you and you don't feel like loving him. But that unconditional love, which is a biblically based perspective, is forcing us to look at your husband as a child of God, and you love him unconditionally, and you look, or your wife, by the way, and you look beyond his or her faults and see the need. And because of that, you develop what I say in my book, friendship of a lifetime. And why I chose friendship as an analogy is because friendship is like a backup generator. The backup generator comes up and holds the power while the main source outage is prevailing. So even in marriage, sometimes you fuss about a lot of things with your husband or your wife, but sometimes if your friendship is strong, you find yourself laughing and forgetting what you were fighting and fussing about. And that helps, because while the power outage of intimacy is off, the friendship kicks in and bring you back together.
Absolutely. Dr. Nxumalo, listen, I'm going to be the first to say it here. I think your next book needs to be a culmination of analogies, because your analogies are absolutely perfect. I mean, you're talking about comparing love to a rose, and, you know, it's beautiful, it's sweet, but it also has those thorns. Yeah. And it can hurt you.
We tend to focus on the thorns
exactly.
instead of focusing on the aroma.
I love it.
Yes.
I absolutely love it. And then the friendship analogy with the backup generator, it all makes perfect sense. So do me a favor, the second book, all analogies, and, you know, make sure to, you know, give me some credit on that, since I helped spur you on this, you know, this precipice and push you in that journey. You know, Dr. Nxumalo, joking aside, another phrase that came up a lot while I was doing research on your book is you talk about this silent battle of the mind. Talk to our listening audience about what you mean by that phrase. What is the silent battle of the mind? And how does one, first and foremost, acknowledge it and then overcome it?
Yes. In the context of marriage, remember what I said, that marriage is an institution that was made by God. It did not come by surprise. Voila, I'm here. God himself designed marriage. Now, the devil keep on telling us that's battle of the mind. No, you can do this thing. You are fine by yourself. You don't need God to guide you on this.
Right.
That's where the battle of the mind is. And he's telling us a lie, that we have the capability of discovering our own divinity. We can be God by ourselves. No, he tried that, remember? When he said, I will ascend and be like God and above God, but he did not reach that. So the devil, in his way, he likes to try and promise us what he himself does not have, and he himself cannot attain. But we are not smart enough to see that God wants the best for us, and he gave the marriage so that it should be something that pulls us together, gave us intimacy, bonding. And I always tell people that one of the things God gave within the context of marriage, he gave them sex. God invented sex, but the way it is taken by the world. You would think that we discovered it and we created it and ran away with the rope.
Absolutely.
And we forget that it was given to us for three reasons. One, for procreation, which we understand that very well. There wouldn't be billions of people in the world if that was not true.
Absolutely.
Number two, we embrace it for not for friendship. We embrace it for it's nice. That's why children are experimenting, because they want to experiment and feel good about it. But the third part, which people don't understand, which I like to accent, is bonding. God wanted sex to be a glue, to glue wife and husband together. And we forget that when people sleep around, that they are gluing themselves, super gluing themselves with all these people around. And that is not what God intended. When he said, leave your mother and your father and cleave is glue, stuck glue with your wife. So why I'm saying it's battle of the mind, we like what God has provided us, but we don't understand that it's important for us to enjoy this thing within the context of marriage in a healthy way by following what he said we should do.
Absolutely. Guys, again, here on the line with Dr. Nozipho N Nxumalo. We're discussing her wonderful book, Pillars of Joy in Marriage, looking at marriage in heaven's eyes. Available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. And remember, go to her website. You can't purchase it there, but you're definitely going to want to gather all of the information that she has in store. And her website is infinitypinnacle.com. You know, Dr. Nxumalo, I've held off long enough. My listening audience is going to get very upset with me if I don't ask this next question. Now, again, we know that there are 22 pillars, and we've already started to go into some of them, I'm sure, in varying degrees. But as a way to offer a little bit more of a teaser to our listening audience as to what to expect when they purchase your book, let's go into some of those pillars specifically, maybe one or two of them, to offer a little bit more of a teaser, a little more of an understanding of what to expect.
Yes. And also, before I continue, I just want to say something about physical intimacy. That's one thing the general public is interested in, forgetting that sex is spiritual as well.
Absolutely.
And I say in my book, if your marriage is only predicated on physical intimacy without the other ingredients, like emotional and so on, it is void. And I'm serious, it is void.
Absolutely.
Because, for example, women and men approach it differently. Women are more emotional, and and if the emotional part is not satisfied, the man does not understand what's going on here. However, I'm moving on from there to talk about one thing that is very important in marriage, to look at your spouse, as I mentioned before, as your brother or as your sister, and understand that both of you are equally responsible for nourishing marriage, but individually accountable for the part you have played. And also, I look at marriage, one of the pillars, I think is chapter 13, that marriage is an investment. If you don't invest in the marriage, you are a taker, you withdraw, and there's nothing left there. And also, I talk about a marriage as very important to have humor. It's simple, but I tell you, it helps in many ways. And also to understand that your spouse is different. And you know, we believe that opposites attract, and we're attracted to people who are not like us. But we spend all our quality time trying to make that person like you. That is insane. And also, I would like to talk about forgiveness. That's one thing we do not do very well in marriage. A little thing sets us up, and we we are fussing and we have grudges and we entertain residual anger. And I say, please try and forgive your spouse. Remember that he is not or she is not a saint, and neither are you. Look beyond the shortcomings and look beyond the imperfections and see a need. I remember one time counseling a gentleman who said, my wife talks too much. He always mumbled this and mumbled that. I don't know what she wants. I said, what she wants is love. One time when she carries on, just grab and hug and kiss and tell her you love her and see what the reaction is going to be. He said, it worked. She started laughing and forgot what she was fussing about. So it's important to look beyond the fussing and all that and see a need. Absolutely. And also loving unconditional is very important. My definition of loving unconditional is loving a person not because he deserves it, not because he wants your love, but to love that person anyway because he needs or she needs your love.
Here on the line with Dr. Nozipho N Nxumalo.
Nxumalo.
We just finished discussing her wonderful book, Pillars of Joy in Marriage, looking at marriage in heaven's eyes, available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Make sure you're gathering more information at her personal website, infinitypinnacle.com. Guys, there's so much information there. Let's grow, let's develop, let's educate ourselves. And it starts with this fantastic narrative. Dr. Nxumalo, this has been such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Yes.